Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cut Rate Commander, the series in which we take a look at low-priced commanders and make budget decks with them. My name is Grazzet and today we'll be looking at the Drow Priestess, Trelasarra Moondancer. Before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see what commanders you can vote for in the comments for an upcoming episode. So with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Trelasarra Moondancer is a 2/2 elf cleric that costs a green and a white with the following effect. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Trelasarra Moondancer and scry 1. Sporting a low CMC and stat line, Trelasarra's ability makes it clear that she cares about life gain. Going further in depth into her ability, it becomes apparent that our commander cares much more about the quantity of life gain rather than the quality of it. After all, no matter how much life we gain from a single source, Trelasarra will only ever get one +1/+1 counter and scry 1, so multiple sources of smaller life gain seem to be preferable over singular big sources. This will not only help our commander grow quickly, but also gets us multiple scries per turn to let us dig through our deck and manipulate its top card more efficiently. So clearly our commander wants us to take her in a life gains matters direction, which is exactly what this build aims to do. Sticking to what I mentioned previously, our life gain will be focused more on the quantity rather than the quality, running plenty of small but repeatable sources of life gain, so we can proc them turn after turn to grow our commander, keep our life total high, and dig through our deck for payoffs. Speaking of which, we'll be running plenty of life gains matters cards alongside our commander to give us extra value from our life gain in the form of card draw, +1/+1 counters, and creature creation. As a secondary theme, we'll also be focusing on +1/+1 counter generation, seeing as our commander is going to be stacking themselves with +1/+1 counters, and the life gain strategy that we'll be implementing already has some overlap with this theme. That means we'll be running plenty of cards that are capable of generating +1/+1 counters for themselves or others, as well as giving creatures with counters extra utility, making sure that it's not only our commander that's getting huge as the game progresses. So let's break out the protein, hit the gym, and show our opponents the benefits of living a healthy lifestyle, mostly by hitting them over the head with our swole creatures. So now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's start looking at the deck itself by starting with the creatures. Beginning with the CMC 1 slot, we start with a trio of life gainers with Essence Warden, Soul Warden, and Soul's Attendant. All three are 1/1s with the same effect, to gain us 1 life whenever another creature enters the battlefield, making them superb sources of life gain as they proc not only when we summon creatures, but when our opponents do so as well, keeping our life total high and proccing our payoffs again and again. Closing out this slot, we have Speaker of the Heavens and Alseid of Life's Bounty. Speaker of the Heavens is a 1/1 with Vigilance and Lifelink that we can tap to create a 4/4 flyer at sorcery speed, so long as we have 7 or more life than our starting total, giving us a good body to grow with counters thanks to its keywords, and a means to get some decently sized evasive bodies on board as we accumulate life. Alseid of Life's Bounty is a 1/1 with lifelink that we can pay 1 in sack to grant target creature or enchantment we control protection from a color of our choice until end of turn, making it a life gain source that can also protect our commander or enable it to bypass blockers as needed. The CMC 2 slot is up next with even more life gain in the form of Impassioned Orator, Kazandu Nectarpot, and Prosperous Innkeeper. Impassioned Orator is a 2/2 that gains us a life whenever a creature ETBs under our control, which is not as good as some of the previous cards mentioned that proc off everyone's creatures, but is still very much playable since we're running a large creature base to proc off its life gain effect. Kazandu Nectarpot is a 1/3 with a landfall trigger that gains us a life whenever we put a land into play, giving us a decent defensive body that gains us life as we make our land drops per turn. Prosperous Innkeeper is a 1/1 that gains us a life whenever a creature ETBs under our control and creates a treasure when it ETBs, having the same creature-based life gain effect as Impassioned Orator with ramp tossed in as an extra bonus. The life gain plan then continues with Suture Priest and Daxos Blessed by the Sun. Suture Priest is a 1/1 that gains us a life whenever a creature ETBs under our control, as well as causing our opponents to lose a life whenever a creature ETBs under their control, giving us a repeatable source of both life gain and burn as players summon their creatures. Daxos is a 2-star whose toughness is equal to our devotion to white, and who gains us a life whenever a creature we control ETBs or dies, giving us another source of repeatable life gain that procs when our creatures enter and leave play. Some +1/+1 centric creatures are up next with Scavenging Ooze, Ajani's Pridemate, and Arcus Acolyte. Scavenging Ooze is a 2/2 that we can pay a green to exile a card from any graveyard, gaining a +1/+1 counter and gaining us a life if it was a creature. Allowing it to play multiple roles is a repeatable source of graveyard hate, life gain, and +1/+1 counter generation. Ajani's Pridemate is a 2/2 that gains a +1/+1 counter whenever we gain life, mirroring our commander's effect to grow ever larger as we continue with our game plan. Arcus Acolyte is another 2/2, this time with Reach, Lifelink, and Outlast for a hybrid green-white that grants all our other creatures without a +1/+1 counter Outlast for a hybrid green-white as well, giving us a creature with relevant keywords that we can grow over time, and that grants +1/+1 counters to creatures who can't generate them on their own. Closing out this slot, we have Conclave Mentor, Serene Steward, and Sakura Tribuilder. Conclave Mentor is a 2/2 that, whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on a creature we control, it gains that amount +1 instead. Additionally, when Conclave Mentor dies, we gain life equal to its power, usually doubling up our +1/+1 counter generation and giving us some life when it's finally dealt with. Serene Steward is a 2/2 that, whenever we gain a life, lets us pay a white to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, giving us another life gain payoff in the form of counters for a relatively low cost. Sakura Tribuilder is a 1/1 that we can sack to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped, serving as a staple source of green land ramp for us. Moving into the CMC 3 slot, we have some +1/+1 counter generation and synergies with Celestial Unicorn, Abzan Falconeer, and Tuskguard Captain. Celestial Unicorn is a 3/2 that gains a +1/+1 counter whenever we gain a life, making it a slightly bigger and expensive version of Ajani's Pridemate that we run for the same reason. Absent Falconeer is a 2/3 with Outlast for a white that grants all creatures we control with a +1/+1 counter on them flying, providing some relevant evasion for our commander, itself, and our other pumped creatures. Tuskguard Captain is a 2/3 with Outlast for a green that grants all other creatures we control with a +1/+1 counter on them trample, giving us yet another means for our commander or other beefed up creatures to get through blockers. Rounding out this slot, we have Knight of Autumn, Good Fortune Unicorn, and Courser of Krufix. Knight of Autumn is a 2/1 that, when it ETBs, has us choose one of the following effects. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, destroy an artifact or enchantment, or gain 4 life, giving us a suite of options that synergize with our existing game plans alongside some relevant removal. Good Fortune Unicorn is a 2/2 that puts a +1/+1 counter on any creature we control when they ETB, making it a good source of counter distribution that takes advantage of our large creature base. Courser of Krufix is a 2/4 that has us play with the top card of our deck revealed, lets us play lands from the top of our deck, and gains us life whenever a land ETBs under our control, smoothing out our land drops while gaining us life and providing us with more information to use alongside our commander's scry. The CMC 4 slot is up next, the first half starting us off with Twinblade Paladin, Lathiel Bounteous Dawn, and Tristani, Selesnia's Voice. Twinblade Paladin is a 3/3 that gains a +1/+1 counter whenever we gain life, in addition to having double strike so long as our life total is above 25, giving us yet another threat that grows as we gain life with an easily achievable double strike considering our deck's life gain theme. Lathiel is a 2/2 with lifelink that, on each end step, distributes +1/+1 counters to other creatures equal to the amount of life we gain that turn, allowing it to serve as another constant stream of counters for our creatures, especially with life gain that procs on our opponent's turns. Tristani is a 2/5 that, whenever a creature ETBs under our control, gains us life equal to its toughness, in addition to allowing us to pay 1, a green, a white, and tapping it to populate, giving us some more creature-based life gain with the option of increasing our token count, which we'll be covering a bit later. The latter half of this slot then gives us Armorcraft Judge, Beast Whisperer, and Loxodon Hierarch. Armorcraft Judge is a 3/3 that, when it ETBs, draws us a card for each creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it, making it a potent +1/+1 counter payoff in the form of card advantage. Beast Whisperer is a 2/3 that draws us a card whenever we cast a creature spell, taking advantage of our large creature base to proc regularly and keep our hands nice and full. Loxodon Hierarch is a 4/4 that, when it ETBs, gains us 4 life, and we can pay a green, a white, and sack it to regenerate all our creatures, making it a sturdy body that can effectively protect our board from destruction or damage-based wipes. Last in this slot, we're running Abzan Battle Priest, a 3/2 with Outlast for a white that grants all our other creatures with +1/+1 counters on them lifelink, giving us another counter payoff that synergizes well with our life gain plan. The CMC 5 slot is up next with its pair of entrants, Blossoming Bogbeast and Sunscorch Regent. Blossoming Bogbeast is a 3/3 that gains us 2 life when it attacks, then grants all our creatures trample and +X/+X until end of turn, X being equal to the amount of life we gain that turn. At worst, it's granting +2/+2 and trample to all our creatures, but usually being much higher thanks to the amount of life gain we run. Sunscorch Regent is a 3/3 flyer that, whenever an opponent casts a spell, puts a +1/+1 counter on itself and gains us a life, making it an evasive threat that quickly grows out of control as it accumulates more counters and gains us life to boot. Finally, reaching the CMC 6 slot, we come to our last 2 creatures, those being Nykthos Paragon and Valkyrie Harbinger. Nykthos Paragon is a 4/6 that, whenever we gain life, allows us to put +1/+1 counters on each creature we control equal to that amount, usable only once each turn, again giving us a potent source of counter distribution that procs on our and our opponent's turns as we keep gaining life. Valkyrie Harbinger is a 4/5 flyer with lifelink that, on each end step, if we've gained 4 or more life that turn, allows us to create a 4/4 flyer with vigilance, making it a decent evasive body that's capable of proccing itself when it swings and even creates tokens on our opponent's turns if we're able to gain enough life. That covers all our creatures, so let's move on to our instance. The CMC 1 slot only has a single entry with Light of Hope, which has us choose one of the following: gain 4 life, destroy an enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, giving us a pair of effects that directly contribute to our playstyle while tacking on some niche but relevant removal. A pair of removal spells join us in the CMC 2 slot with Wilt and Return to Nature. Wilt destroys an artifact or enchantment and can be cycled for 2, making it a decent back row removal option that can be cantripped away if we need the card draw instead. Return to Nature either destroys an artifact or enchantment, or exiles a card from a graveyard, giving us some more back row removal that can be used as graveyard hate if required. The CMC 3 slot then starts us off with a trio of removal spells with Beast Within, Generous Gift, and Corrosive Grip. Beast Within and Generous Gift are functionally identical, each allowing us to destroy a permanent at the cost of giving its controller a 3/3 token, making them incredibly flexible removal options to deal with almost any type of threat. Corrosive Grip destroys an artifact or enchantment and has Split Second, giving us a potent back row removal tool that's almost impossible for our opponents to respond to in any way. The latter half of this slot then brings us our last 3 instants with Invoke the Divine, Natural End, and Inspiring Call. Invoke the Divine and Natural End both destroy an artifact or enchantment, the former gaining us 4 life while the latter gains us 3, making them another pair of back row removal tools that provide us with some life gain as a bonus. Inspiring Call draws us a card for each creature with a +1/+1 counter on it and makes those creatures indestructible until end of turn, providing us with a nice +1/+1 counter payoff in the form of board wipe protection and card advantage. That's all our instants covered, so let's move on to our sorceries. Skipping to the CMC 2 slot, we have a pair of ramp spells with Rampant Growth and Farseek, both of which allow us to put a land from our deck into play tapped, the former for any basic and the latter for any non-forest that has a basic land type, making them staple green ramp spells to keep our mana base growing smoothly. The CMC 3 slot then gives us another pair of ramp spells with Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, both of which search our deck for 2 basic lands, putting one into play tapped and the other one into our hand, for another solid source of green land ramp to ensure we make our land drops for turn. The CMC 4 slot is a single entry one with Harmonize, which has us draw 3 cards for some no-nonsense card draw with no extra hoops to jump through. The CMC 5 slot then goes back to pairs, this time giving us Cleansing Nova and Shamanic Revelation. Cleansing Nova either destroys all creatures or all enchantments and artifacts, making it a flexible board wipe to deal with multiple types of common threats. Shamanic Revelation has us draw cards equal to the amount of creatures we control and gives us 4 life for each creature above 4 power among those creatures, giving us some decent card advantage to take advantage of our large creature base and potentially a huge boost in life thanks to all our +1/+1 counter distribution effects. Reaching the CMC 6 slot, we come to our last sorcery with Austere Command, which has us choose 2 of the following effects: destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with CMC 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with CMC 4 or greater, making it a build your own board wipe style effect that can be catered to almost any type of board we may be facing. That covers all our sorceries, so let's move on to our enchantments. A trio of enchantments join us in the CMC 1 slot with Ajani's Welcome, Cleric Class, and Font of Fertility. Ajani's Welcome gains us a life whenever a creature we control ETBs, making it another source of continual life gain as we summon our creatures that's a bit more difficult for our opponents to interact with. The Cleric Class at level 1 gives us an additional 1 life whenever we gain a life. At level 2, which costs 3 and a white, lets us put a +1/+1 counter on a creature whenever we gain life, and at level 3, which costs 4 and a white, returns a creature from our grave back into play and gains us life equal to its toughness, giving us a potent suite of abilities that synergize well with our game plan. Font of Fertility lets us pay 1 a green and sack it to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped, making it another source of land ramp that we can drop early to keep our mana base nice and smooth. Another trio of enchantments join us in the CMC 2 slot with Dawn of Hope, Druid Class, and Ashes of the Abhorrent. Dawn of Hope lets us pay 2 whenever we gain a life to draw a card, and we can pay 3 and a white to create a 1/1 with lifelink, giving us a nice life gain payoff in the form of card advantage, along with the ability to create 1/1 lifelinkers at instant speed should we need them. The Druid class at level 1 gains us a life whenever a land ETBs under our control. At level 2, which costs 2 and a green, allows us to play an additional land per turn. And at level 3, which costs 4 and a green, turns a land we control into a creature with haste and with power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, providing us with some life gain and ramp in addition to creating a massive creature from our lands if we need it. Ashes of the Abhorrent prevent spells or abilities from being cast or activated from the graveyard, in addition to gaining us a life whenever a creature dies, giving us another form of life gain that procs on both our and our opponent's creatures as they get removed, while being a silver bullet against decks focused on casting cards or using abilities from their graves, such as Flashback or Dredge. Skipping to the CMC4 slot, we reach our last 2 enchantments with Angelic Accord and Felidar Retreat. Angelic Accord creates a 4/4 flyer on any end step if we've gained 4 or more life that turn, granting us a steady stream of evasive bodies that can even be created on our opponent's turns if we've gained sufficient life. Felidar Retreat has us choose one of the following effects whenever we play a land: create a 2/2, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control and grant them vigilance until end of turn, which will mostly be playing for the counter distribution as we make our land drops, but does allow us to get extra bodies on board should we ever need them. That covers all our enchantments, so let's move on to our artifacts. Skipping to the CMC2 slot, we have Sun Droplet, which, whenever we take a damage, puts that many charge counters on itself, and on each upkeep removes a counter and heals us 1 life, making it a good source of continual life gain once we've taken damage by healing us 4 life per rotation. Moving to the CMC3 slot, we have Pristine Talisman and Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Pristine Talisman taps for a colorless and gains us a life when it does so, providing us with a mana rock that grants us life as we use it, which is perfect for us. Lifecrafter's Bestiary scries 1 on our upkeep, and whenever we cast a creature spell, lets us pay a green to draw a card. Its scry working well with our commander to continue manipulating the top of our deck, and its draw effects working nicely alongside our large creature base to keep our hands full. Reaching the CMC4 slot, we get to our last 2 artifacts with Cosmos Elixir and Well of Lost Dreams. Cosmos Elixir, on our end step, draws us a card if we have more life than our starting life total, or gains us 2 life if we don't, making it a steady stream of life gain or card draw depending on how our life total is looking at the time, either effect being appreciated regardless. Well of Lost Dreams lets us pay X whenever we gain life, X being equal to or less than the amount of life we gained, in order to draw that many cards, giving us another source of repeatable card advantage that benefits from our life gain plan. That covers all our artifacts, so let's move on to our Planeswalkers. Our only Planeswalker joins us in the CMC4 slot, that being Ajani the Great-Hearted, who comes into play with 5 loyalty, grants all our creatures vigilance, and has the following abilities. His +1 grants us 3 life, and his -2 puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control and a loyalty counter on each other Planeswalker we control, making him a walker that synergizes well with our life gain and +1/+1 counter game plan by doing both, as well as granting AoE vigilance to ensure our pumped creatures will be able to protect us after they swing in. That covers all our Planeswalkers, so let's move on to our land base. Starting off with our mana lands, we have Command Tower, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity, Sunpetal Grove, which comes into play tapped unless we control a forest or plains and taps for either of our colors, Canopy Vista, which comes into play tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands, counts as a forest and a plains, and taps for either of our colors. Fortified Village, which comes into play tapped unless we reveal a forest or plains, and taps for either of our colors. Sungrass Prairie, which we can pay 1 and tap for both our colors. Temple of Plenty, which comes into play tapped, taps for either of our colors, and scries 1 when it ETBs. Croson Verge, which comes into play tapped, taps for a colorless, and we can pay 2, tap it and sack it to put a plains and a forest from our deck into play tapped, including non-basics. And finally, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both which we can tap and sack to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped. For utility lands, we'll be running Gavony Township, Ghost Quarter, and Scavenger Grounds. Gavony Township taps for a colorless, and we can pay 2, a green, a white, and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, giving us a decent instant speed counter distribution effect on a land slot. Ghost Quarter taps for a colorless, and we can tap it and sack it to destroy target land, giving its controller a basic from their deck to replace it, making it a good source of spot removal for our opponent's utility lands. Scavenger Grounds taps for a colorless, and we can pay 2, tap it and sack it to exile all cards from all graveyards, making it a potent piece of AoE graveyard hate to combat against graveyard-focused strategies. Lastly, we're running 11 plains and 12 forests as our basics to fill out our land slots. Now that we've covered all the cards in the deck, let's take a look at this deck's breakdown. This deck currently has 34 creatures including the Commander, 9 instants, 8 Sorceries, 8 Enchantments, 5 Artifacts, 1 Planeswalker, and 35 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 35 sources of life gain, 15 cards that care about life gain, 20 cards that can generate +1/+1 counters for themselves or others, and 4 cards that care about +1/+1 counters, giving us a substantial amount of life gain and life gain payoffs to benefit our primary life gain plan, as well as a decent amount of +1/+1 counter generation and payoffs to make sure our creatures grow quickly and gain extra benefits as well. For general deck stats, we have 10 ramp sources, 10 card draw sources, 10 targeted removal sources, and 2 board wipes, all of which are within acceptable parameters for your typical commander deck. Looking at our mana curve, we have 9 1-drops, 20 2-drops, 16 3-drops, 13 4-drops, 4 5-drops, and 3 6-drops, leaving us with an aggressive curve that allows us to play our life gain and life gain payoffs early to enable our commander and our +1/+1 counter generators as we move into the mid and late game. Currently, this deck is valued at $64.97, not counting the price of basic lands or shipping. This price was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, other life gain payoffs would certainly be good includes here. Light of Promise and Sunbond, for example, would both grow our creatures with additional +1/+1 counters as we gain life, while Griffin Airy, Trudge Garden, and Attended Healer allow us to grow our board state further instead. Other sources of life gain would also be worth considering, with Abiding Grace giving us some decent life gain and recursion for our small but potent life gain creatures, while Felidar Sovereign and Approach of the Second Sun both gain us life and serve as alternative win conditions through our life gain and our commander's scry ability respectively. Other +1/+1 counter generators and payoffs would also be good here, with Spike Feeder being able to gain us life and potentially going infinite with some of our life gain payoffs, Mindless Automaton providing us with card draw by removing its counters, and Champion of Lampholt effectively making our creatures unblockable once it grows big enough. For some upgrades, Authority of the Consuls and Blind Obedience both provide us with potent pieces of disruption that grant us continual life gain. Crested Sunmare gives us a repeatable piece of creature generation that procs on both our and our opponent's turns as we gain any amount of life. Ajani Strength of the Pride packs a suite of abilities that synergize perfectly with our life gain and +1/+1 counter game plan, along with a powerful one-sided board wipe. Aetherflux Reservoir gives us the ability to turn all our life gain into damage, and usually gives us the ability to one-shot our opponents. Archangel of Thune gives us another life gain payoff in the form of +1/+1 counters for all our creatures, and is a decent evasive lifelinker as well. And Heliod Suncrowned is another hard-to-deal-with card to pump all our creatures further as we gain life, while simultaneously granting us extra sources of life gain. Finally, Auroch Champion is another source of life gain that procs both when we and our opponent summon creatures, in addition to having protection from relevant colors. While the Grain Henge is a spectacular addition that benefits from our pumped creatures to reduce its cost, distributes +1/+1 counters, ramps us, gains us life, and draws us cards, with both these cards just costing a little over the price of the entire deck. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Again, I'd like to thank all the channel subs as we've cracked the 850 sub milestone, and as of recording, we're 5 subs away from 900. Sincerely, thank you all for your support, as this channel would be unable to grow without you. Moving on to the votes, it looks like Volo Guide to Monsters has run away with this one as voted by nearly all the voters in a landslide. Moving on to the next poll, we'll be giving the Commander Precon some love, specifically the monstrous commanders that came in them, by having the next poll feature Storev Frost Giant Jarl, Nylor, and Karazakar the Eye Tyrant. Please let me know in the comments which of these 3 monstrous commanders you would like to see in an upcoming episode. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.